Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung said that. And if you've ever felt confident one day, but completely doubted yourself the next, if you've ever wondered why your self-worth feels like it's on a roller coaster, then what I'm about to share might finally explain what's been happening in the shadows of your mind. Give me some time, and I'll show you 9 patterns that Jung discovered can silently drain our confidence. Patterns so subtle, you might not even realize they're happening, but so powerful, they can shape your entire life experience. Here's what's fascinating about Jung's discovery. These aren't character flaws or permanent weaknesses. They're unconscious habits that many of us develop as protective mechanisms. And once you see them clearly, everything changes. But some of these patterns might surprise you, especially number 6, which disguises itself as something most people think is actually good for them. Habit 1. Seeking proof of worth in all the wrong places. Have you ever noticed how a single comment from someone can completely shift how you feel about yourself? Maybe you post something online and find yourself checking back repeatedly, hoping for that validation hit. Or perhaps you've caught yourself fishing for compliments, not because you're vain, but because you genuinely need that external confirmation that you matter. Jung observed that many sensitive, thoughtful people fall into this pattern. You might find that your mood depends heavily on how others respond to you. When people acknowledge you, you feel alive. When they don't, you feel invisible. This often develops when we learn early that our value comes from being useful, likable, or impressive to others. The challenge is that external validation is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. It never quite stays full. But here's what most people don't realize about this pattern, and it connects to something even more subtle that we'll explore next. Habit 2. Comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. You might find yourself scrolling through social media or sitting in meetings, assuming everyone else has it figured out while you're battling uncertainty inside. Perhaps you look at others and think they're naturally confident, unaware that you're comparing your inner struggle to their outer presentation. Jung understood something profound. We see others through their personas, their public masks, while we experience ourselves from the inside, complete with all the doubts and fears they can't see. This comparison habit can be especially challenging for people who feel things deeply. You might think there's something uniquely wrong with you for having doubts, not realizing that the confident people you admire often battle the same inner voices you do. The twist is, this comparison pattern actually sets you up for the next habit, which might be the most exhausting one of all. Habit 3. Perfectionism as emotional armor. Maybe you've noticed that you spend excessive time on projects, not because you love the work, but because you're afraid of being seen as inadequate. Perhaps you avoid sharing your ideas until they're perfect, or you find yourself paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. Jung recognized that perfectionism often isn't about high standards, it's about emotional protection. If everything we do is flawless, then we're safe from criticism and rejection. You might find yourself procrastinating on important things, not because you're lazy, but because the fear of imperfection makes it feel safer not to start at all. Or maybe you overwork on projects that could be good enough, trying to reach an impossible standard. The irony Jung pointed out is profound. Perfectionism often prevents us from building real confidence because we never allow ourselves to learn that good enough can actually be wonderful. But this leads to a pattern that might be even more damaging to your sense of self.
Habit 4. Having an inner critic that never takes a day off. Jung believed that the way we speak to ourselves becomes our reality. You might have developed an automatic internal voice that questions every decision, points out every flaw, or compares you unfavorably to others. Perhaps there's a commentary running in your mind that you've become so used to you don't even notice it anymore. Maybe when you make a small mistake, you immediately think, "That was stupid of me." Or when you accomplish something, you quickly dismiss it with, "Anyone could have done that." This inner voice often develops as a misguided attempt to protect you. The unconscious logic goes, if I criticize myself first, then other people's criticism won't hurt as much. Jung understood that this internal dialogue literally becomes the foundation of how we see ourselves. When we habitually speak to ourselves with harshness, we begin to believe that assessment is accurate. If you recognize this inner critic in yourself, drop a shh emoji in the comments below. Sometimes just acknowledging these patterns can be the first step toward change. But here's where it gets interesting. This inner criticism often leads to a pattern of avoidance that can completely limit your life experience. Habit 5. Avoiding anything that feels uncertain or uncomfortable. Jung recognized that genuine confidence grows through facing challenges, but many of us may have developed a habit of saying no to opportunities that excite us but also make us nervous. Maybe you find yourself avoiding difficult conversations, turning down interesting projects, or staying in situations that feel too small for you simply because they're familiar and safe. This avoidance often develops as emotional self-protection. Uncomfortable feelings can be scary, especially if you learn that you should always feel fine or that anxiety means something is wrong. But Jung observed something crucial. When we consistently avoid discomfort, we also avoid the experiences that build genuine confidence. Real confidence comes from discovering that we can handle more than we thought we could. You might notice this when you feel excited about something, but then talk yourself out of it by focusing on everything that could go wrong. And this avoidance pattern often connects to another habit that can be even more subtle and exhausting. Habit 6. Putting everyone else's comfort before your own. This might be the habit that surprises you, especially if people have told you that being considerate is one of your best qualities. You might find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, or agreeing with opinions that don't align with your own values. Jung understood that many thoughtful, caring people develop this tendency as a way of ensuring they won't be rejected or cause conflict. It often develops when we learn that being agreeable keeps us safe and loved. Perhaps you've noticed that you automatically consider how others will feel before you consider how you feel. Maybe you find yourself editing your opinions to match the room or exhausting yourself trying to keep everyone happy. The challenge Jung identified is that when we consistently prioritize others' comfort over our own authenticity, we lose touch with who we really are. Our confidence becomes dependent on maintaining this accommodating persona, which is exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. You might find yourself feeling resentful after agreeing to something you didn't want to do, or realizing you don't even know what your own preferences are because you're so used to adapting. But this people-pleasing pattern often leads to another habit that keeps us stuck in past and future rather than present confidence.
Habit 7. Living everywhere except the present moment. Jung observed that confidence exists primarily right here, right now. But many of us may have developed a habit of mentally living elsewhere. Perhaps you find yourself constantly rehearsing future conversations or reviewing past interactions, analyzing what you should have said differently. Maybe you spend considerable mental energy worrying about scenarios that may never happen, or replaying mistakes and missed opportunities from your past. Jung understood that this mental time traveling often develops as an attempt to feel more in control. If we can predict every possible future scenario, maybe we can avoid pain. If we analyze past mistakes enough, maybe we can prevent them from happening again. But this habit keeps us from developing what Jung called present moment resilience, the confidence that comes from knowing we can handle whatever actually arises, rather than trying to control what might arise. The next habit might be one of the most self-sabotaging of all,
and it's something many good people do without realizing the damage it causes. Habit 8. Deflecting compliments and minimizing achievements. When someone acknowledges your good work, do you immediately say something like, "Oh, it was nothing," or "Anyone could have done that"? Perhaps you have a habit of focusing on what went wrong in a successful project rather than celebrating what went right. Jung noticed that many people develop this pattern as a way to stay humble or avoid seeming arrogant. Sometimes it comes from a fear that if we acknowledge our accomplishments, people will expect too much from us or will be disappointed if we can't repeat the success. You might find that even when something goes really well, you can't quite let yourself feel good about it. Maybe you immediately start thinking about all the ways it could have been better, or you assume people are just being nice when they give you positive feedback. Jung understood that this pattern of deflection prevents us from internalizing positive experiences. When we consistently minimize our accomplishments, we don't allow them to contribute to our growing sense of capability. But this connects to perhaps the most subtle and destructive pattern of all. Habit 9. Confusing brutal self-analysis with self-awareness. This might be the most sophisticated trap Jung identified. You might believe you're being insightful and growth-oriented when you constantly analyze your flaws and shortcomings, but there's a crucial difference between genuine self-reflection and destructive self-criticism. Maybe you spend time thinking about your patterns and behaviors, which seems like a good thing. Perhaps you pride yourself on being honest about your weaknesses and committed to self-improvement. But you'll observe that healthy self-awareness feels curious and compassionate. It notices patterns without harsh judgment and asks, "What can I learn from this?" rather than, "What's wrong with me?" Many thoughtful people develop a habit of equating brutal self-criticism with honesty or growth. We might think that being harsh with ourselves shows that we have high standards or that we're committed to improvement. But Jung understood that this kind of self-criticism often keeps us stuck in the same patterns, while genuine self-awareness opens the door to actual change. When we approach our habits with curiosity rather than judgment, we create space for transformation. You might notice this habit when your self-reflection sessions leave you feeling worse about yourself rather than clearer about your path forward. Now here's what Jung discovered that changes everything about these 9 patterns. Every single one of them developed for a reason. They weren't random character defects, they were your psyche's creative attempts to help you navigate challenges, often when you were young and had fewer resources available. The fact that you developed these patterns shows your mind's incredible intelligence in trying to keep you safe and help you belong. These habits made perfect sense at some point in your journey, even if they're not serving you well now. Jung's approach was revolutionary because he never saw these patterns as things to eliminate or fight against. He saw them as unconscious adaptations that, once brought into awareness, could be transformed into sources of strength. Each habit contains within it a strength that got misdirected. If you seek external validation, you have a deep capacity for connection. If you're a perfectionist, you have attention to detail and high standards. If you're a people pleaser, you have genuine care for others' well-being. The goal isn't to eliminate these tendencies, but to bring them into conscious choice and healthy balance. Jung believed that our greatest strengths often emerge from learning to work skillfully with our most challenging patterns. If you recognize yourself in several of these habits, please be gentle with yourself. This recognition is actually a sign of growth and consciousness. Most people live their entire lives unconscious of these patterns. If any of these habits are resonating with you, consider subscribing, because in upcoming videos, we'll explore Jung's specific techniques for transforming these patterns into sources of genuine confidence and inner strength. Because once you understand how these patterns developed, you can begin to work with them consciously, rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. Which of these 9 habits resonated most with you?
Comment the number below. Your insight might help someone else feel less alone in their journey. And if this video helped you understand yourself a little better, consider giving it a like. It helps more people discover these insights. See you soon.